Life is sweet. Let it sweep you off your feet.
Hi, it's Sally and Find Your Joy. Please do remember to like and subscribe. Today, oh my gosh, we have I said we have I don't know, what am I going to call you? A superwoman? I don't know. Wonder Woman, amazing woman, a powerhouse, and I'm sure you've felt like anything but that many times. Julie Barth is going to tell us a bit about her story and her daughter's story and her husband's and I promise you, I don't know. I think you're gonna probably cry and be encouraged, and she's quite witty, so I don't know. Maybe you'll laugh too. I'm not sure. But anyways, Julie, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm very excited to have you here. You know what? I was so there's a lot of
Yes.
moving pieces in your story, and I get that because I have a different story, but a story with lots of moving pieces. And so sometimes it's sort of, where does one even start? So um, let's introduce us first, maybe, to the story from the very beginning. We have so much going on with your daughter and your husband and all that has happened, and maybe take us back and briefly tell us a little bit about, I don't know, the wonder and the sadness and the joys, and introduce us to these characters who are true to life people.
I will. I will. So I grew up with a man. His name is Colin, and we were, from the minute that I can really remember memories, I moved from a small town to a different small town, and he was like the very first thing I remember when I moved there. You know, it, it's just weird. Like, so I met him and I used to practice, ironically, writing my name. So I tell my kids this all the time. Like, I used to practice writing Julie Barth. And obviously that was not my name at the time. But so we kind of went our separate ways, and we went to the sixth grade fun fair together, and he was my first kiss, although he would always tell people I was not his, and people thought that was really funny. Um, but we ended up kind of meeting back up again after college, and downtown Chicago. We were in our 20s, very young, and it was just like I ran back into my best friend. And I tried not to like him because we had kind of grown apart, and he was dating other people, and maybe I was spiteful that he didn't like me anymore. Whatever it was, I just thought I was too cool for him. But we ended up just like really melding, and we got together and we had our son, and everything seemed to be going along fantastically. We moved back to the same hometown that we were from. So we moved from the city back home and had a house. We tore it up and started doing things ourselves. And then I got pregnant with our second child. And I had had a couple pregnancies that didn't work out. And where Hayden, our first son, was an oops, Tatum wasn't. She was very planned for, and since I lost all the babies, I was very cautious of everything and what was going to happen, and she just stopped growing. So I would go to the doctor, and they would say, "Oh, congratulations, you're pregnant," and I was like, "I know." And then I would go back again, and they'd be like, "Congratulations, you're pregnant. You're 6 weeks," and I'd be like, okay, just thinking, well, I guess they must be off. So then 10 weeks later, I go, congratulations, you're pregnant, you're 6 weeks. And I was like, what's going on here? So from then until Tatum was born, it was just a barrage of, they would tell me that she had trisomy 18, which is she would come out, she wouldn't be able to breathe. And then, just one thing after another, And as many times as I went to the doctor, no one could ever show me that anything was wrong. Her proportions were great. She was fine. We'd have our scares. And then she came out, and it was like everything just collapsed. She was born 3 pounds. I thought she was going to be full size. And they used the wrong size intubation tube, and it was just a disaster. So we ended up, she was in the NICU for about 4 months. And at the time, nobody really knew what she had. So I went to 3 or 4 different hospitals, and I would take her, and, they would say, she looks funny. And even though you have a special needs child or whatever's going on, that doesn't not hurt when someone says she looks funny. And that almost became
She looks, what did you say?
she looks funny.
Oh, funny. I
Oh,
thought you said
yeah.
fine. Oh,
No, she looks
okay.
funny.
She looks
Yeah,
funny. That's an
funny.
interesting choice for a medical professional.
And it wasn't just one medical professional. It would be like, we went to the Mayo Clinic. We went to, we started in Chicago at Children's, and, that would be their diagnosis is she looks funny. And I, again, as a mom, you don't even know how to take that,
Yes.
and it was pre-internet. So, there wasn't like you can just Google something,
Right.
Can you imagine, right? So we went to different hospitals. Nobody could figure out what was going on. She had a trach, and everything was out of control. So after many travels, many scares, we ended up at the Mayo Clinic. They still couldn't diagnose her. They went through all the genetics again. I think we had 10 different geneticists on her case. And really all they could tell us is, yeah, she's small. And, I think that I needed to hold on. I was happy that they didn't find a diagnosis, because if they didn't have one, then I could
Right.
hold on to the fact that she would be just fine. And that's what they tell you. You won't even notice what happened when she grows up. So, in the midst of all of that, Colin and I just, we were best friends. We did everything together. We had a barrage of nurses in our home who wouldn't show up. It almost became like, I said, like, Jack Tripper, the Three's Company, where we would name nurses like the lovely Lolita or whatever it was, because they wouldn't show up. So, we had all that going on, and then came the internet, and that's where things got kind of crazy. They had a special show on, and it was on the Discovery Channel. And one of my friends called me, and she said, "I know what Tatum has." And I was like, "Oh, I'm glad you do, because I've seen the leading specialists in the world." And
Right.
so it was primordial dwarfism. And at the time, they thought only like 1 in a million people had it. Well, I don't think that's the case anymore, because now people are getting online. And Tatum never fit because she was always, 1 inch too tall, or, whatever it was. And there's no genetic marker for it. So I was slightly offended. And, I didn't want to accept it. But then again, I did, I guess.
And how old would Tatum be at this point? Sorry.
Tatum was about 3 when all this
Okay.
happened. And I did have like individual people come up to me at the grocery store and say, "Is your daughter the one that's on that Discovery Channel show?" And I had never seen it. And I didn't even know what was going on. And I was like, it kind of went along with the whole "she looks funny." I was like, what? How do you people know my daughter? And so one day I went home, I had the friend telling me, I had all these other people telling me, and I got on the internet and Googled it, and up popped Tatum. I mean, it was like, oh my gosh, it was just this whole light bulb went off in my brain. She has primordial dwarfism. So we discovered that she had, but she was on her road to recovery, and she was making great strides. No matter what happened, they would come and they'd say, "Can Tatum walk upstairs?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I don't know." Sure enough, she'd be up those stairs. I mean, she met every single milestone against all odds. Between the lack of oxygen at birth, there was medical malpractice at birth, so they stripped her vocal cords. And when they stripped her vocal cords, they didn't tell us about it, which led to a trach. And the trach led to eating problems. And it was just this cascade of one thing after another. Anything that would go wrong has gone wrong with Tatum. Even to this day, I will tell you, I go to fast food. I go to McDonald's, and now I have 6 children. and I will bring home everyone's order. And I will tell you, Tatum's will always be missing. It is the strangest thing. Like, I will order all these meals, we'll get home, and it's like Tatum's is always missing. Or, you know, there's always just something. It's just the universe. You know, if there's no reason why she's still here, I guess is what I'm saying. It's like she's either the luckiest of the most unlucky or the most unlucky of the luckiest, because she's beaten everything, whether that's good or bad. She's always on the smallest minuscule side of something. So she did, you know, grew up like everyone else. I always made sure she was like everyone else. She couldn't move her right arm, so I went to see a therapist and I started tying down her left arm so she'd use the right. She couldn't walk because she had a G-tube. So I had another therapist, and I would stand her up and I would push her so that she would learn, you know, the step response. She just kept doing what everybody said she couldn't, over and over. And we finally got to a place where we had reconstructive surgery on her throat, and we had another baby, and then another baby. And Colin and I were best friends. We did everything together, and all of a sudden he just started acting really strange. You know, he would have a sip of alcohol, and it would be like he was just completely drunk, and we were not like that. So everything just seemed off, and he started pulling away a lot. And then we ended up, we were having this huge Halloween party. We were a very big part of the community. We, you know, again, 4 kids, 6 months to 11. And we were having this huge Halloween party. I think there was like 300 people and bands, and he was just being a stick in the mud. And I hate to say it, but I was like, gosh, you're just so crabby. And I said, he was going back and forth to the doctor, and he was telling the doctor he had a stomach ache. And, you know, I think we were just so close and such good friends that it was almost like, I just was like, just figure it out. Like, I can't do this, you know, stop being crabby. So he went to the emergency room, and I went to do my stuff, and I called him, and he said, you know, basically, I'm still here, and he couldn't tell me why. By the time I had gotten there and raced across town, they told us that he had 2 weeks left to live, and that he had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and to just take him home and let him say goodbye to his kids. So that was a really quick synopsis of the entire book. Well, not the entire book, but it just seemed to me that it's been a lifelong of one thing after another after another. You know, it was like once something got better, something else fell. And that's kind of been our experience. But at the same time, Tatum continues to be Tatum, and she is the sweetest, kindest, tiniest. I mean, she's 24 pounds. She's 24 pounds. She also had cancer, so she had her right side torso removed. You know, it's just, again, it's one of those things. I don't want to keep spoiler alerting everything that, you know, is in the book, but she's just a force, and a tiny one at that, but mighty. So.
So, wow, it leaves you a little bit speechless, right? There's no, so your husband's name is Colin,
It was.
and what year did you lose Colin?
He passed away in 2009. So
2009.
it was quite a long time ago. My book, which is about Tatum and Colin, sat on my laptop for 12 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. So the story behind the book is that when Colin was going through chemotherapy, he ended up living 16 months, not 2 weeks. But we would have these Tuesdays that we would go downtown, and we had all these little kids. And so in my head, because I have this need to make everything rosy, I was like, oh, it's going to be a great time. We're going to reconnect. But we'd get there, and he would just be so sick that he didn't want me moving around or anything. So I had a BlackBerry, and I was a stay-at-home mom. I have a bachelor's and I had a master's degree, but I chose to stay home with my kids. Sometimes I had a choice, sometimes I didn't. But I was always kind of a writer by nature. So while he would, go through chemo, I had a BlackBerry and I was writing Tatum's story because I was right when he fell, when he fell to cancer, Tatum was taking off. It was like she was soaring and he was falling.
Mhm.
So I was still coming off of the sting of all the things that happened with Tatum. And so I started writing her story. And I'm glad I did, because it is such a roller coaster ride that I would have forgotten it had I let it sit all those years. But I would write her story and I would email it back to myself. And it necessarily, went on so long that it flowed into Colin's story and it became real time. So everything in the book is, it's retro, and then, but it then becomes the actual experience of what's going on in the moment.
Right.
Again, I'm so glad that I was able to capture that. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of people said to me, well, it must be very cathartic. It must be, and I think that's why I let it sit on my laptop for as long as it. Well, first of all, I don't think I could have brought myself to read it. Reliving it was, I basically, when he passed away, packed him away. I took
Right.
everything of his and I put it in a nice little plastic container, and I decided, like, well, we're just going to move on. And I didn't want to unpack any of that. So it sat for, like I said, over a decade, until I finally thought, because when he was in his final days, I had made a promise to him that it would, that I would keep his memory alive, and that what he went through, I wanted people to like experience it and know, because cancer is like the Twin Towers. If someone had said to me at the beginning of all of his treatment, after going through everything I went through with Tatum, that I would go through what I went through watching him die slowly every day, I wouldn't have believed it. I wouldn't have known. We used to call it chemo day because we would go downtown. It's just your whole world turns upside down. And after coming off of Tatum, which is just crazy enough, to then have that experience with Colin, that was so much harder in some ways.
Right.
Yeah, and it really made me, when I did finally decide, I had another, which my second book is my second chapter after he goes, and that'll be later this year. When I went through the second round, it really reminded me that I forgot my promise to him, and my promise was that I would make sure everyone knew of his courage and who he was and how amazing he was. So we started, Tatum, myself, her older sister, or younger sister, she's just bigger, Piper, who is now she's a freshman in college. We started a charity organization at her school. She had something called Genius Hour when she was in 6th grade, and she was only 18 months when Colin passed away, and she was only 6 months when he was diagnosed. And after he was diagnosed, he pretty much wasn't there. But we decided that we would keep his memory alive. So we started doing some pancreatic cancer funds, fundraisers and stuff, and she headed it all up. And so that's where our charity organization came from. So that's the crux of, why I'm trying. I'm glad the book is out there, and I know that it's a lot. I will say there, everyone who's read it that has spoke to me has said, wow, that's their first impression is wow. And then I get a lot of, it was sad. But hopefully, the thing that shines through is just the resilience of Tatum's tenacity. I mean, she's just such a bundle. And Colin, it was almost as if he was around just to make sure that Tatum was on her way. And then it was almost as if, like, my time here is done. And it was such a natural progression of, you're good now and I need to go. That's kind of hopefully what people take out of the story. Not that it's, there is so much joy to be found in the little moments.
Right. And that's what, I mean, I was chatting with a friend earlier today, actually, and just talking about, I mean, being a human is, it's a big calling.
Yeah,
And, and
it's not for the faint of heart.
it is not, those are the exact words I used to my friend.
Yeah.
Being a human is not for the faint of heart. And when I'm hearing your story and I'm thinking about the things that you went through and the difficulties, so I have some questions that might be helpful for listeners after, but um, tell me some of the moments of joy that you said that there is a lot of sadness in it, and I understand that part. I'll tell you that why I started this podcast, how I changed my book in the middle of writing it, all of those kinds of things were basically, that's what they were about. It was about how do we find joy in the midst of it? Because there is everybody's got a horrible story. Like nobody gets out of this. I mean, and certainly not taking away from how incredibly uh, awful and hard and challenging what you and your family have gone through is. And so many people have gone through really, really hard times. And I think what is it? The quest, what do we want to do is how do we find moments of joy, even while someone is dying, even knowing that. And it was interesting when you said you said it might have even been harder for you with Colin than it was with Tatum. I thought, well, that makes sense to me because with Tatum, you're always fighting and staying hopeful that there was going to be an answer and she was going to be okay. And with Colin from the very beginning, it was maybe prolonging what would be and knowing, just finding a way to have the best possible goodbye. So they're very different experiences having a daughter with that lives with some challenges and disabilities and has been through some rather horrific things, and my story is a bit with her in it too as well, and then having people that I love die. The difference to me is, one, we're finding the very best way we can to say goodbye, and that's hard. And the other is, while we're hopeful,
Yeah.
it's hard to not look for that.
Yeah. And well, I guess my experience was different. Colin's mother had, and it was a genetic cancer. Colin's mother was the oldest surviving ovarian cancer patient in the United States. She was diagnosed at the age of 40 and didn't pass away till 72. She outlived Colin by many years.
By what? Sorry, she outlived Colin?
By 7 years. Yeah. So, I didn't. I was in denial. I was not letting him go either. So I don't know if that was the case. I think it was more, Tatum almost felt like she was loaned to me, and I saw her as a project. And I hate to put it into those terms because I don't mean that I didn't love her. I did love her, but it wasn't the same because I had to fix her. It was my job to fix Tatum, and I didn't even get a chance to get to know her. So I almost separated her into a box. She was something that I was going to tweak and change, control, find the right specialist, get her, So I didn't have that relationship with her yet. I didn't want to. I thought she was on loan to me. So I was going to do the best I could with what I had.
Right.
And I never thought about the future with her. I was so in the throes of it that there was no thought time. I think the reason why it was so hard with Colin is because he had been all I'd ever known my entire, not just my adult life, my childhood. When you have a special needs child, you have two choices as a couple. And we were in the NICU for 3 months watching all of this craziness go on. And we saw couples around us that either you bond together and you fight together, or you fight each other.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
we just had this dynamic where she was gonna make it. Nobody was gonna tell us what to do. And that's who we were. We were like Benifer. Julie and Colin were the same human. And we had been for as long as I could ever remember. So the thought of losing him is who am I? I'm Julie Collin, and without Colin, I didn't have an identity.
Right.
So that was, but in saying that, I think Colin and I both had lived with Donna, lived with Tatum, and we understood before he got sick that life is not promised, life is not endless. My father, in the midst of all of it, right before Colin and I had our first son, my father was the age that I am right now, and he was just a worrywart. I mean, we couldn't vacation. We were going to die in a plane. He was so afraid to live he was so afraid of dying that he never lived. And I grew up with that. And he ended up passing away from a heart attack. And I knew it was happening. And, I think as a human, you have two choices when you grow up in those situations. You can either follow suit, or you can say, take a good look at it and say, not me. And I think that is why Colin and I were able to maintain, is because we saw that Donna had, every day that she woke up was a day gifted to her. My father put his life on hold because he wanted to retire. And guess what? He never retired because he didn't ever get to the age. So I think the combination of the two of us, where we grew up, our role models, we were able to find those pockets that if you don't have them, I wouldn't be here today. Because if I didn't have the little epithets and the little, Tatum, she had a trach, so she could never talk, and she had it from birth. So, I never heard her cry. And it's just such a natural thing to hear a baby cry. And, it took us 2 years and traveling around, but they found this little thing called a Passimir valve. And it was a valve that you put over her trach. And she's 8 pounds. So she's like running around. Her first walking shoes were 0 to 3 months from the gap. They were this big, and she would run around the house, if you can even imagine. But we put that little cap on her trach, and that sound that she made, it was the very first sound I had ever heard her made at the age of 2. And, that sound is a sound that I will never forget. It was the biggest joy that I can even imagine. And the thought that, like, it's just a sound, but that little sound was everything to me at that point. So I think I don't know how people continue to roll bounce if they don't have those little pockets of goodness mixed in there. And sometimes you gotta like really dig to find them.
Right.
Yeah. And I think I'm very blessed, and people have asked, they say to me like, gosh, I don't know how you're standing, and I don't see it that way. I feel sorry for people that can't feel those little pieces of joy, because my life wouldn't be what it is if I wasn't able to look at a situation and see, like the positive in it. And I know I've had people probably think that, I'm in denial, that I live in whatever it is, I'm sure. But I always say to them, well, you know what, I'd rather live in denial. It's much more fun in here because I don't want to be in your world. I want to stay in mine. Um,
Yeah.
but
I don't think there's denial in looking for some joy, because the reality is that people get sick and people die, and babies die, and people are born with disabilities, and some people have accidents or illness that create a like there is no shortage of horrible
misery.
things to deal with. And if that's all I'm looking for, then it's going to be a very sad, long life. And it's not, and like you said, I don't feel like I'm in denial when I can be in the hospital in the middle of something. When my aunt was dying of cancer, I was teasing her. I had a whiteboard and I was drawing things on, like she had, like we were like, it was, that's what we did, right? Because that was joyful. There was really warped dark humor in those moments, and we went for them fully with all our hearts, like we did in everything else that we did. And it's the same with my brother. The day like before he died, he was so unwell, and well, you think he was in hospice, and he was so close to it, and he totally zinged me. He pretended he died so that I would go like this. And then he looked at me and just sort of, he couldn't even speak. He couldn't do anything. And he looked at me and he just this little side grin. I said, "You did not, John, you did not just do that." And then his sons came in later, and I'm telling them about it. And I'm not even kidding you. My brother did this. And his one son said to me, "Did that just happen?" He said, "I've never seen my dad do that." And I said, "Because you're a son and not a sister." That's how that goes. Like,
Right.
these are the things, like people who've been in those places, they understand that you find those places,
Yeah.
and that's how that goes. So now, is Tatum able to speak now?
So Tatum does speak. She so vocal cords do two things, and I I didn't know this. Now I do, but they vibrate, and that's what allows you to talk. And then they open and close, which allows you to breathe. So her vocal cords were working, meaning that they vibrated, but because they had damaged her throat at birth, they were fixated open.
Ah,
So she was able to talk, and when she had the Passimir valve, she had this like high pitch, and it's we didn't know it at the time, but it's built into primordial dwarfism. They talk like Mickey Mouse kind of.
right.
So she had this like, yeah, the cutest little like. But what happened was we had to have surgery on her throat. It was one of those, we have to tie her vocal cords back, or she'll have a trach. So I said, "Oh, is she going to lose her voice?" And they said, "No." And everyone, she did. And people are like, "Are you mad that?" And I said, "No, because I would not have wanted to make that decision. Trach, no voice." So she does, you can hear her, but she pushes air. Her vocal cords don't vibrate. So it sounds like you have to get up real close, and she can talk, but you just have to really listen. One of my
Right.
friends, one of my best friend's sons used to call her my secret friend. And this is when they were like 3, and I was so offended. I was like, "What? My daughter's a secret to you?" And she's like, or the mom finally was like, "No, because she whispers to him all the time." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's so cute." And I just made it so not nice. But I hear you with I always say that you have to laugh at the unfunny. That is where, if you can't laugh at the unfunny, you can't find joy in life. Um,
Yeah.
you know, I I love your story because I had a similar Colin. I went to him. He was 2 weeks close to. And if you knew Colin, it's even more funny. But he was laying there, and I had a hospice nurse say to me, "Well, he's here for a reason. He's waiting for something. So, of course, in my selfish little world, I was like, oh, he wants me to, tell him it's okay to go. And, because I never really, we weren't like the hand holding, lovey dovey. We were more like the, hey, high five, let's have a beer kind of couple. So I was like, oh, I bet he's waiting for me to just say I'll be okay. So he's, laying in his hospital bed, and he's at his parents at the time when I came up, and I said, Colin, and he, he's just laying there, and I said, I just want to tell you that you're my very best friend. And I'm, bawling, letting it all out. You've always been my best friend. We're going to be okay. And, just losing my mind. And he started like moving around, and I was like, Colin, are you okay? What's going on? He goes, I need to sit up. Will you please stop? You're bothering the hell out of me. And I was like, well, I didn't mean it anyway. I walked away. But I was like, that is so him. And I know it was because it was too much for him at the time to like, he was listening, but he didn't want to hear it. But that was just, he had so many things like that. Like he took our car, he was on a morphine pump. And I told him, don't drive the car. We went inside, and he was like, just leave the keys. I just need to wait for a second. This was when he was 70 pounds and really didn't know much of what was going on. And I said, I'll leave the keys, but you cannot drive this car. And we were at like Red Robin, I'm not going to drive the car. Next thing I know, so Hayden, my son, and I are, watching. There's this little window, and I see the car just screaming around the driveway, and I run out there, and I'm like, Colin, what are you doing? And he just like stopped the car, and he gets out, and he's like, you're no fun. And I mean, it was just like a 2-year-old had stole my car. And so we go inside, and he like gets a milkshake, and he's sitting at the table just like slurping it like a kid. And it's just, it was Hayden's birthday, and I thought, oh, this poor 12-year-old kid, like this is going to be his memory of his 12th birthday. And we dropped Colin off, and the two of us laughed the entire way home, imitating him, the way he was walking out, like,
Yes, yes.
Um,
Because
and
what
he
else are
would
you going
want
to
us
do?
Yeah, and he would want us to. Like,
Yes.
he never wanted people to feel sorry for him. He never wanted
Yeah.
people to be sad, And that's one of the hardest things about illness, in my opinion. People want you to be sad. They want you to feel the gravity of it all the time. They want
Yes.
it to follow you. They want it to define you. And if you're not sad, then you feel bad that you're not sad. And then, it's this whole like, didn't realize I have a lot of survivor's guilt about a lot of the things that I did. And I just necessarily did them. But then I think a lot of people, in their perception of what you should do and how you should behave and how you should feel, didn't jive with what I felt. And it made me feel bad about me, because I
Right.
thought, did I not love him? Should I have been more sad? Should I have grieved a different way? Like, and you wish them gone because you're seeing them suffering, but you're
Yes.
wishing that suffering person gone. But then they go, and there's that part of you that thinks, oh my God, I wished him dead and I loved him. And then it's just, you have to unpack all of these feelings of what you did and what you said. And, me making the decision for him to stop treatment without telling him. I used to tell him all the time, oh yeah, Colin, we're going for chemo tomorrow. It was like a cruel joke that we were playing on him, because it didn't matter what I said. He wasn't really there anymore. But in that moment, being forced to say it to him and lie to him felt so wrong. But again, I think it's just, we all have these perceptions about how we should behave, what it means to love someone, how it means to grieve, what you should do when they're dying. And you don't know until you're there
Yeah.
how you're going to feel.
You
And I don't
don't.
think there's an appropriate way.
No,
Get
I
through it.
absolutely agree. I agree. It's there's there's layers of it, having waiting for a child to be born, and then disabilities come, and then there's a grief that goes with that, and then people that we love get sick and they die, and there's different ways that that looks depending on the relationships we have and depending on how many times we've done it before, and and
Right. Right. And how much of a wall you've built up, because you have to. You cannot continue to be hit by a tidal wave without building stronger legs. I mean, it just doesn't happen. And you become numb to these situations because you realize where it stands in the grand scheme of things. And the more you go through it, the more you're resilient to it. And the more, but from the outside, I'm sure that it looks like you don't care or you're callous or like, how are you doing that? How are you not feeling? And it's not that you're not feeling, you just recognize that no matter how you feel, you're not going to change the result of it.
well, you have what, 6 children?
I do have, yes, I have 6 in total. Yes.
Yeah, so completely losing it wasn't an option.
No,
That,
no.
this is
Yeah,
this
at the
is
time I had 4, but yeah.
okay. So 4 kids,
Yeah.
even one child,
Yeah.
even one child that has typical needs is we don't get to completely lose it.
No.
We don't get to do that. And it doesn't mean that it isn't what we'd want to do, but it's put on your big girl panties and you find a way to go forward. Now, for me, I'm a kind of a touchy-feely person, so I've made a choice to go in pretty deep now when I'm losing people. I tried I don't know how to say that. I mean, I joke around. I'm there like you. I'm there for people when they need me. I'm there. I show up and I allow myself to feel. And sometimes like you, I think, heal them or take them. Heal them or take them. That's, and sometimes I've seen people suffer for a very long time, and I've seen really beautiful things happen in the midst of that. Our dad, while he was dying, and before he was in hospice, and then once he was, there was so much healing because there had been a lot of wounding in our family, and there was just so much healing, and I can remember thinking, how are you doing this? Like, there's MAID, right? Like there's medical assistance and death. There's like all these things you could choose to do. And I don't know, right? It just my thoughts. I don't even know what I would think if it was me personally, but there's all these things. And, you know, my dad was just like, a hero in he was the hero that he longed to be in his life in his death. Like I mean, he was just
Right.
he was already an amazing guy, but he just came clean with any mistake he'd ever made and asked for forgiveness, and we walked it all out, and he spoke such blessings over each one of his kids and his grandkids, and to me he was a superhero. Like, how do you he was just incredible. And there was, there was joking, and there was all of these things that were going on. And so I think whenever we're being really honest, if we're going to be really honest, and that means there's going to be anger, and there's going to be sadness, and there's going to be silliness, and everything that we can imagine, it's all going to happen.
Yeah, whether you want it to or not.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Great point. Right.
Yeah.
Not like we go, okay, today is silly day. It's just, it shows up, and then we just go with it.
Yeah. And I think,
So,
to speak to your part about anger, it's very hard too, because who are you mad at?
yeah, right.
I was so angry for so long, and it's like, there's nobody to be mad at. Like, can you be mad at God? Sure, you can be mad at God, but what's that gonna do? And then I felt guilty about being mad at God, And
Yes.
it was like, just I was so mad that it was happening, but there was nowhere for that anger to go,
Yeah.
like, and I think that's why you just kind of like it's almost like eating too much and just like shoving all the fat in your pants, and you're like, I'll deal with that later.
Yes, yes,
You know, but
yes.
then the button starts popping and you're like, oh no, you got to
Now what
deal
have I
with it
done?
then, you know?
Now I have
Like,
to deal with this.
yeah, no,
It's
there's no shoving
true.
that back in. That
Yeah,
ain't going back
it's true, right? It's just so um I was gonna ask you, I was thinking about this. So I mean, we didn't go into these things knowing all of this, right? I didn't, I
Get a
think
handbook.
probably before, I think I could have, I can remember, thinking, oh, maybe I'll be a grief counselor before I'd ever really,
Yeah.
truly, you know what I mean? Oh, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that. And then we have these really difficult times come up and we learn through that. So I don't know. I guess I was just wondering, what are some of the big life lessons that you think you've learned through it, and is there even a way for you to put those into a few sentences or paragraphs or something that you could share with somebody who's listening right now, who's just had their child diagnosed with a disability, or their husband has been diagnosed terminal, or something like that? They're listening to us and maybe they've gone through this before and maybe they haven't. I always try to find a way to share a map with
Yeah.
people, a map,
Yeah.
because this is where
I
you are and it sucks to be where you are. And I know that it sucks to be where you are, and it's hard and it's scary and it's sad. And I promise you that there is a way to the other side. And it might not be the one you wanted.
no, God, definitely gives you more than you can handle.
Yeah, yeah, yes, that's
I remember in the final days talking to Colin, and I think it was, if not his last day, somewhere very close to that. And he looked at me and he said, Jules, it didn't work. It didn't work. And I said, you're right, Colin, it didn't work. And he said, I'm still sick. This isn't what I want. And I said, do you remember when Tatum was born? And of course he said yes. And I said, remember we went to a bar and Tatum had, she wasn't supposed to make it 10 hours and she wasn't supposed to, and it was like a week into it. And we realized we saved her, but at what cost? Like we had done everything we could. We wanted her here. We wanted her here. And we went to a bar that we used to go to all the time, totally different field, just the two of us down the street from the hospital. And I just said, what are we unwrapping here? We had to have her. But then what did we do in saving her? And I said, do you remember that moment? He said, yeah. And I said, what we learned in that moment was that everything does really happen because there's beauty in it.
Mhm.
But you have to get on the other side of it to see that beauty. And that sucks. I hated the phrase everything happens for a reason. I hated it. I hated when people said I wrote a book about 7 phrases to never say to anybody going through something, like
yes.
whatever, because we all say the same 7 things, whatever they are. They're in there somewhere. But that everything does happen for a reason. It might not be the reason you want. It might not be a good reason. It might not be what you're expecting, but there is a plan. There has to be a plan. And if there's one thing that Tatum has taught me is there is a plan. And the more you try and fight against it, the harder it is. Sometimes you just have to lean into it and just know that, first of all, nothing lasts forever, which is both good and bad. And secondly,
Right.
nothing, whatever you're dealing with, it doesn't last forever. And when you're in the thick of it, in the woods, it feels like nothing is ever going to get better. But it does. It necessarily has to. I mean, if you want to look at it like that, it has to change. It has to get better. You're not going to be stuck in whatever you are forever, even though it feels like you are. And when you when you get to the other side of it, I promise that you will look back at it and it will make sense to you and you will see why it happened. And you will find meaning in it.
Mm. I love that.
Thank you.
That sounds like a really good place to end for this time.
Yes.
That quick. That's the perfect thing right there. I can't believe that that we've been sitting here for almost an hour. That's I feel like I just known you for a long time, and I really appreciate you with so much grace and courage, and you shine. You
Thank
shine
you.
brightly, and
Well, you have to have me on for my second book because that one
oh,
gets
I can't
juicy.
wait. Are you?
That's when things really get crazy. After I read the first book, I was like, 10 years later, I read it and I thought, oh my gosh, crazy stuff didn't even start yet. So that's your
Exactly. Well,
wind up
and
to book two.
that's the thing. It was just about to, right? There was all these other things.
Yes.
So I'm just I can't wait to have you back when that does. So I just want to because it's time to wrap up, I want to make sure I say Julie Barth. There's so much that you're going to learn about her. She started a nonprofit, a charity called Colin James Barth. Tatum has gone on to be an artist, and you'll be able to find her stuff, her art in Hope for Tay, HOPE for Tay, Tay. There's a lot that we're going to do, but there's going to be show notes, and you'll be able to find ways to get a hold of Julie and to talk to her and to connect and to find out all this stuff. And I really suggest that you do that. Julie, thank you.
Thank you for having me. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I think that we probably felt like we've known each other because we get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
In a good way.
In a good way, because there's good
and
stuff.
And you're doing a great thing. I mean, there is nothing that makes somebody in trauma feel better than knowing that they're not alone. So what you're doing is amazing.
Thanks. Julie, thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing a bit of your story. And I look forward to the next time that you're going to be here and and coming to share some more. And to our listeners, thanks so much for coming and hanging out with us. You'll be able to find Julie, like I said, through her show notes. Please remember to like and subscribe, and to remember to find your joy. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you found a piece of your joy in this episode, I would love to hear about what came up for you so that we can continue to grow the impact of this show. Thanks again. See you soon. And remember, find your joy.